Men start missing you more when they realize you're no longer emotionally available. When the silence you leave behind becomes louder than any word you ever spoke. It begins the moment you stop chasing, stop waiting, stop hoping. The shift is subtle at first. You don't announce it, you don't slam doors, you don't scream, you simply start pulling your energy back. That's when everything changes. Because when a woman truly detaches, not to manipulate, not to punish, but to protect her peace, it sends a message far more powerful than words. I respect myself too much to keep giving where I am not received. He doesn't notice it right away. At first he may think it's just space, a breather, a phase. He tells himself, you'll be back, you always are. But this time is different, because this time you're not sitting by the phone. You're not rereading old texts. You're not stalking his social media, trying to decode the meaning behind every like, every story, every song. No. This time you're doing the one thing he never thought you'd do. You're moving on. Men begin to truly miss you the moment you emotionally detach. This isn't about physically walking away or cutting ties in a dramatic fashion. It's deeper than that. Emotional detachment is subtle, quiet, and incredibly powerful. It's when your energy no longer leans toward them, when your heart stops anticipating their messages, when your mood is no longer tied to their behavior. At first it goes unnoticed. You're still there, maybe in the same routine, maybe even smiling politely, but inside something has shifted. The investment that once fueled your words, your actions, your patience, it's no longer present. And that absence of emotion, that absence of need, creates a space they never expected to feel. Emotional detachment is not about coldness or cruelty, it's about self-preservation. It happens when you've poured and reached a place where your cup is empty. You realize that your feelings were never reciprocated with the same intensity, that your loyalty was met with uncertainty, and that your love was taken as a given, not as a gift. And so you stop giving, not out of spite, but out of clarity. You stop explaining yourself, you stop initiating conversations, you stop showing up for someone who doesn't even notice the effort it takes for you to stay. Men often don't understand the depth of emotional connection until it's no longer there. When a woman detaches emotionally, she no longer reacts. She doesn't argue, she doesn't chase clarity, she doesn't wait around for mixed signals to turn into something consistent. Instead, she lets go. And it's that letting go. Not loudly, not bitterly, but peacefully. That makes a man begin to feel the gravity of her absence, because he was used to her energy, her support, her encouragement. He was used to being emotionally fed by someone who saw the best in him, who held him up even when he didn't ask for it. When that emotional presence disappears, it leaves a void. And that void cannot be filled by attention from others or temporary distraction. It's specific to her. It's specific to the way she made him feel, seen, heard, understood. What men often fail to realize in the moment is that emotional detachment is not an overnight decision. It comes after repeated disappointments, after too many second chances, after late nights spent crying, wondering, questioning her worth. When she finally detaches, it means she's done all the emotional labor she could. She's emptied her heart of hope and expectation, and from that place she begins to build walls, not to block love, but to protect herself from further damage. Her silence becomes her shield. Her distance becomes her strength. He may still see her, but he no longer feels her. And that is what begins to haunt him, because it's not the words she once said or the gestures she once made that he misses. It's the emotional connection, the feeling of being deeply wanted and unconditionally accepted. When that connection is cut off, the realization sets in. Silence has a language that echoes louder than words ever can. When a woman who once expressed everything suddenly chooses not to speak, that silence becomes deafening. It's not about giving the cold shoulder or playing games. It's about reaching a place where words no longer serve a purpose. When you've explained yourself countless times, when you've cried, pleaded, or tried to make someone understand what you need, and they still don't respond with the depth you deserve, silence becomes the only answer left. It is the final chapter after all the conversations have been exhausted, and it speaks volumes. A man often doesn't hear your pain in the noise of arguments or confrontations. He tunes out when emotions run high or when you're begging to be heard. But when that noise disappears and you no longer try to explain, he starts to notice something is different. It's not just that you're quieter. It's that your energy has shifted. Silence is not the absence of care. It's the announcement that something has changed. That you've stopped trying to fix something that was breaking you. That you've withdrawn, not to punish him, but to protect your peace. He hears the silence in your delayed replies, in the lack of follow-up questions, in the missing warmth of your usual tone. The powerful thing about silence is that it gives space for reflection, for realization, and for regret. A man who once took your voice for granted begins to notice what it meant. He remembers how your words used to uplift him, how your affection used to validate him, how your presence made things feel safe. And now that you're silent, he begins to feel a discomfort he can't explain. It isn't anger, it's emptiness. It's the realization that the connection he once felt so certain of is slipping away, not through a dramatic explosion, but through the quiet closing of a door he never expected to be shut. Silence creates mystery. It forces someone to ask questions they never thought they'd need to ask. Is she gone? Does she still care? Why isn't she reacting? That internal uncertainty begins to gnaw at his thoughts. In national release, he replays memories, rereads old messages, wonders if he misjudged how deeply you felt or how far you could be pushed. The silence becomes louder than any argument because it doesn't come with explanations. It leaves him to create his own, and those imagined narratives often hurt more than the truth ever could. He doesn't know what you're thinking, where your heart is now, or if he even matters anymore. And that uncertainty is powerful. While words can be dismissed, defended against, or distorted, silence cannot be debated. It simply exists, and in that existence, it confronts him with a version of you he never thought would emerge, the version that no longer feels the need to be understood. A woman's silence is not weakness, it's strength. It's clarity. It's the final proof that she no longer needs to speak to be heard. Self-respect is the invisible force that changes the entire dynamic of any relationship. When a woman begins to respect herself enough to walk away from what drains her, something powerful happens. She reclaims her value. Men feel that shift instantly, even if they don't admit it. Because the moment you stop tolerating what once made you cry, the moment you stop fighting for someone who wouldn't fight for you, you rise in power. You're no longer pleading to be chosen, no longer waiting for breadcrumbs of affection, no longer accepting less than what you deserve. And that decision, quiet and strong, reshapes everything. A woman's self-respect is magnetic. It radiates in her posture, her choices, her silence, and her boundaries. When a man sees that the woman who once overextended herself for him is now choosing herself, he doesn't just see a change. He feels a loss because you were always available, always forgiving, always ready to overlook the things that hurt you just to keep the connection alive. You gave chances that weren't earned and excuses that weren't true. But when self-respect kicks in, the script flips. You start listening more to your inner peace than to your emotional cravings. You no longer explain why you're hurt, you simply withdraw. You no longer justify your worth, you stand in it. A man starts missing a woman not just when she's gone, but when he can no longer access her the way he used to. That access was never physical, it was emotional. He could feel her heart still beating for him even in distance. But once self-respect rises, that emotional access is cut off. She no longer feels the need to respond to his patterns. She no longer makes herself smaller to keep him comfortable. And in that silence, in that detachment, a man is confronted by the reflection of how poorly he handled a gift he didn't deserve to keep. Self-respect doesn't come from bitterness. It comes from awakening. It comes from realizing that love without dignity is not love at all. It's dependence. It comes from understanding that peace is more precious than temporary validation. The woman who once begged is gone. In her place stands someone who knows her worth, who understands that being alone is better than being disrespected, who knows that walking away doesn't mean weakness, it means wisdom. That shift is unforgettable. Men often remember the woman they lost only when she no longer looks back. They remember her strength, her loyalty, her care. But most of all, they remember the moment she stopped needing them to feel whole. You stop waiting for closure. You stop needing validation. You stop chasing someone to make you feel seen. You become the source of your own light. That's the moment he begins to question everything. Not because you left, but because you left while loving yourself enough not to return. That kind of self-respect lingers long after you've gone. There is something unforgettable about a woman who chooses to heal, grow, and glow in silence. When she stops focusing on the man who hurt her and starts pouring that same energy into herself, everything changes. He may have walked away thinking she'd always stay broken, always be stuck in a cycle of waiting, weeping, and wondering, but instead she chooses to rise. She uses the pain as fuel. She transforms the rejection into redirection. And as she grows into a stronger, wiser, more radiant version of herself, the memory of who she used to be and who she has now become starts to haunt him. At first, he doesn't notice. He assumes the silence means she's still hurting, still missing him. But with time, the glow becomes undeniable. It shows in her confidence, her peace, her decisions. She starts setting boundaries she never had the strength to before. She laughs from a deeper place, not because someone gave her a reason, but because she gave herself permission to be free. She doesn't need validation, she becomes validation. And suddenly the man who once doubted her worth is faced with the reality that he lost someone irreplaceable. Growth doesn't happen overnight. It's built in the quiet moments, the lonely nights, the deep conversations with oneself. It's built when she chooses to read instead of cry, to pray instead of beg, to journal instead of rant. She finds purpose in solitude. Her mind clears, her heart opens, but this time to herself. She no longer lives for someone else's affection. She no longer bends to someone else's indecision. Instead, she evolves, slowly, steadily, powerfully. And while he may not be watching every step of her transformation, he will see the result. Whether it's through mutual friends, a random photo, or a brief conversation, he will notice the shift. The energy is different. The woman he thought would always be waiting is now walking in purpose, beauty, and strength. It's not revenge. It's not a strategy. It's simply what happens when a woman turns inward and stops waiting for closure or apologies. She becomes the closure. Her glow becomes her shield. And as she shines, he remembers the version of her that once gave him everything. He remembers her softness, her loyalty, her depth, and now that she's whole without him, that memory becomes bittersweet, because he realizes she didn't stop loving, she just started loving herself more, and that love transformed her. While the world may applaud loud successes, it's the quiet healing that makes the most lasting impression. She didn't need to announce her growth, she simply lived it, and that lived truth speaks louder than anything she could have said. He starts to feel her absence not because she disappeared, but because she evolved. And that evolution becomes the one thing he cannot forget. It lingers in his thoughts, in the silence, in the space where her love used to live, reminding him of the rare kind of woman he once had, but could no longer keep. A man begins to miss you more when he realizes that your love was not ordinary, it was rare, deep, and irreplaceable. In the beginning, many men don't fully understand the kind of love they've been given. They may see your consistency, your patience, your affection, and assume it will always be there. They take for granted the way you checked on them, the way you believed in their potential, even when they doubted themselves, the way you stayed even when you were hurting. At first, your love becomes background noise, reliable, steady, always available. But when it's gone, when the messages stop, when the concern disappears, when the comfort of knowing someone is always in your corner vanishes, the weight of that loss becomes painfully clear. The kind of love that truly leaves a mark is not based on games or temporary highs. It's the love that shows up, the love that listens when no one else does, the love that forgives more times than it should, the love that sees a man's flaws and chooses to stand beside him anyway. That kind of love is spiritual, it's healing. It's a mirror that shows him not just who he is, but who he could be. And most men don't meet that kind of love often, so when they do, and then lose it, they carry that memory with them far longer than they expect. They might try to replace it, they might seek it in someone else, but what they soon realize is that connection like that cannot be duplicated. When a woman pulls back that rare love, it creates a void that other people cannot fill. It's not just about losing a relationship. It's about losing the peace, the encouragement, the emotional depth that only she offered. A man may chase thrill, excitement, or convenience elsewhere, but those things lack soul. And once he's had a love that touched his soul, anything less begins to feel shallow. He may not admit it, he may hide behind pride or distraction, but late at night, in the quiet moments, it hits him. He remembers. The way you spoke life into him, the way you sacrificed without keeping score, the way your presence felt like home. There's a certain sting that comes when a man realizes he mishandled something sacred. It's not just regret, it's grief, because now he sees what he couldn't see before, that you weren't just a good woman, you were the woman. You were the kind of woman who loved with depth in a world that often runs on surface. And now, the memories play back with new meaning. Every moment that once felt ordinary now feels golden. Every laugh, every hug, every message becomes a treasure that he lets slip through his fingers. And while life moves on, that kind of love lingers in the background of his mind, reminding him of what he had and what he will likely never find again. There's a unique power in the moment when a woman stops chasing and starts receiving. The energy changes, the dynamic shifts. She no longer pours her time, attention, and heart into trying to prove her worth, into trying to fix, convince, or hold on to something that was slipping through her hands. Instead, she leans back, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. She understands now that love is not meant to be begged for. Presence is not meant to be demanded. Affection should not be earned through sacrifice. So she chooses to step into her feminine power, not by doing more, but by doing less. By allowing, by attracting, by becoming the version of herself that no longer waits on someone else to validate her place in their life. When a woman stops chasing, she reclaims her dignity. She begins to focus on her own life, her goals, her peace, her glow. She becomes magnetic, not because she's trying to be noticed, but because she is fully immersed in her own energy. She finds joy in her space. She cultivates fulfillment in her own world. Her happiness is no longer dependent on how someone else responds to her. That independence doesn't push people away. It draws the right ones closer. And the man who once felt her energy chasing, pursuing, trying, is now left with silence, stillness, absence. And in that space, something powerful happens. He begins to miss her in a way he never expected. He notices that the energy that once pursued him is no longer there. The messages have stopped. The check-ins have vanished. Her presence no longer circles him. And now, instead of her reaching for him, he feels himself reaching for her. He begins to remember all the ways she made him feel seen, supported, admired. He begins to realize that her consistency wasn't weakness, it was strength. That her loyalty wasn't desperation, it was devotion. And with every passing day that she remains silent, focused, and flourishing without him, the more he feels the weight of what he lost. The truth is, men feel more drawn to women who have stopped trying to win them over. It creates a mystery, a space where they must now step up or lose her forever. That gap forces them to ask real questions, to evaluate their own behavior, to confront their own immaturity. The woman who used to overcompensate now feels out of reach. Not because she's playing hard to get, but because she's no longer giving her energy away without being truly seen. And that makes all the difference. You're not cold, she's centered. She's not punishing, she's protecting. Her boundaries have become gates, and they only open for someone willing to truly value her presence. That shift from chasing to receiving is where her power lives. She doesn't try to control the outcome anymore. She simply becomes the kind of woman who knows her worth so deeply that anyone not willing to match her energy fades naturally. And as she glows in her own lane, the man who once took her for granted now finds himself hoping for a second chance, realizing that she was never asking for too much, she was simply asking the wrong person.